everyone for coming out on a Friday morning. So today we've got a great panel with us and we're going to talk about our disposable culture. So I will introduce a little bit firstly about Science Gallery. Hands up if you know about Science Gallery. Okay, most of you do, but to be honest, we love plugging ourselves, so you'll just have to put up with that. So Science Gallery is part of a global network of galleries dedicated to engaging young people in STEM through the collision of art and science. So I might just drive, thanks. So we partner artists and scientists together. We do programs that are future focused, that are theme based. For example, our exhibition DISPOSABLE, which is coming up. And at the heart of the Science Gallery mission is really that we believe that young people are the solution to the world's biggest challenges. And so them combined with artists, science and innovators can help us, I guess, innovate our way out of this mess. So Science Gallery International, which we're lucky to have the CEO Andrea Bandelli here, started in Dublin in 2008 at Trinity College and is now spreading to global domination. So Science Gallery London opened last year and we have galleries in development here in Melbourne at Melbourne University, in Venice, Detroit, Bangalore, Rotterdam, with a few more to come on in the next couple of years as well. So on that note, here we are here at the front of Melbourne Connect. So Science Gallery will be kind of like the front door to the Innovation Precinct, which is really exciting and, as you all know, I'm sure, which is opening at the end of next year. So at Science Gallery, we love big questions. We don't know the answers, but we like asking them. And we like placing people, particularly young people, I guess, in the centre of those questions and really making them think about their ethical and social responsibilities. So we all know the global statistics around the war on waste are really depressing. And even here today, we're drinking from disposable coffee cups. I got here in an Uber. It's pretty bad. It's not even 9 a.m. yet. And I feel like, we're all contributing to this issue. So and I think in Australia, particularly at the moment, we know about the issues with recycling and SKM. And we're potentially about to have a massive landfill crisis. It's pretty depressing. We read about it, we see it in the streets, and we're kind of living it. It's the number one thing that comes up when we talk to young people. And so what are we going to do about it? So Science Gallery really, I guess, is tackling this issue from a different perspective. So thinking about what are these creative solutions that we as artists, science, innovators and young people, not me, but others, what can we do about these problems? So today we have a great panel assembled and we're going to start to try and scratch the surface of these questions and start to think about how we can try and take the lead on these problems. So on our panel we have Dr. Andrea Bandelli, who's the CEO of Science Gallery International. Andrea is a world citizen, a diplomat, an author, an advocate, a connector of people, places and ideas, and also got the memo on the loud shirt. Like me, Andrea also has an amazing collection of bright pants. We have next to me Yana Art, who's a new media artist and activist from Indiana, which is the home of Mike Pence. Yana is a Science Gallery collaborator, having had works in Science Gallery Detroit, now in Melbourne and also upcoming in Science Gallery Dublin. Yana's work, which she's wearing and we'll talk a little bit about, is like an ethical Fitbit, so to track your ethical performance on pollution. And lastly, we have Madison Ryder, who is an award-winning innovator and creator of single-use plates crafted completely from waste lettuce, called Lettuce Eat, which is every dad's dream joke. And Madison was the winner of the NGV Design Challenge earlier in the year. You can see some of her plates over there, which are fantastic. So I'm going to start by asking you guys some big questions, which I haven't briefed them on. So Andrea, I know you best, so I'm going to start with you. Would you drink recycled urine?
Yes.
So I don't know whether you know this, but Melbourne's one of the only places where, so the eastern seaboard, it's not legal to drink what's called recycled water, which is water made from completely sterilised urine, and it's because of the taboo around it. So in Perth, this is legal now, and in other parts of the country. Here, it's made into a beer called Pilsner. So Andrea, talk me through why you feel comfortable about that.
Well, very simply because the science says it's fine, it's clean, it's perfect. So there is, of course, it is very difficult psychologically. There is even, I remember at the Exploratorium in the Science Center in San Francisco, there is a exhibit where there is a fountain, a drinking fountain, in the shape of a toilet.
Great.
And it is perfectly clean, never used as a toilet, and still it's so hard to drink from that. And has nothing to do indeed with the science. Unfortunately, our system prevents us from doing things that we should do. So I think it's great to stimulate and to provoke in this way, because before we know, maybe this may become a major, I mean, astronauts.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I think it's great, and therefore we can be bold in these kind of things. That's why I say yes.
Yeah, great. Rest of the panel, gonna drink the recycled urine?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Can't wait to try it.
So Madison, would you eat food from a dumpster? Again, this is illegal in Australia.
Definitely. I literally went dumpster diving just the other day to get some lettuce.
Right. And so are you shocked when you go dumpster diving at the amount of food waste?
There is so much food waste out there, and there are amazing initiatives like Food Bank and Oz Harvest that they're doing their best to save all this wasted food, but in the end of the day there's so much that's just going straight to landfill. And a big part of that is just how we perceive food. And for example, I know a lot of bakeries, they need to have it displayed all the time. 5 minutes before you're closing, it's full and it looks beautiful and for a reason. But unfortunately, because of that, you have to just throw it all out because there's not enough food-saving initiatives to go around.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing just for it to look aesthetically pleasing to consumers. And Jana, would you wear clothes made from waste?
So this picture was circulating around the office yesterday and causing quite a buzz. These look amazingly comfortable to me, so I'm all about it. It's better than Crocs.
Yeah, that's right, it is better than Crocs. There's a slightly sort of fancier artisan sourdough version as well for hipsters. So I guess you all come from slightly different backgrounds. And Andrea, I know you work a lot in your role with Science Gallery with young people across the globe. And I guess thinking about the role that young people are playing in climate change activism globally, can we be optimistic about the future?
I would say yes. We can be optimistic. We should be optimistic because, in fact, I think what happens if we don't start by trusting the new generations that they have the solutions, that's a big mistake on us, and then we fail the new generation. So even more than being optimistic is really we need to establish that trust, and that's really very important. A few weeks ago, I met somebody remarkable. Her name is Isabel Wijzen, and together with her sister Melati, she is from Bali. And when they were 12, they saw the problem of plastic bags on the island of Bali, and they started a movement, 12 years old, to ban plastic bags in Bali. So they created this grassroots movement called Bye Bye Plastic Bags. And a few months ago, the government of Bali banned plastic bags on the whole island because of their engagement. And they've been, of course, also on all the media, on Time Magazine, Youth of the Year and BBC and TED Talks and so forth. When you see these young people, and also how unassuming and full of really care for each other and for the environment is so refreshing that it gives me more than optimism. It gives me certainty that young people can do this. And I guess as organizations, we need to nurture that, we need to trust them, and to enable their agency. And there are, this is one story that went indeed worldwide, but there are so many, and actually even their movement is worldwide. And there is nothing better for young people than learn from their peers, because we can say, whatever we want, but if a 16-year-old talk to another 16-year-old and engage with them, that is real social change. So enabling that agency is our work. And it works. We've seen it many times over and over. So yes, I'm optimistic, and I think it's our responsibility as institutions, as universities, as entrepreneurs, as industry to nurture that trust.
Yeah, great. And I guess a follow-up question for you, Madison. How old are you?
23.
Yeah. And so, do you feel that in your peer group, this is a major issue that you guys are talking about?
Yes and no, actually. I've sort of divided into all of my university friends. We're all over the sustainability. We believe as designers, it's our responsibility to make it easy for the general public to be sustainable. But some of my other friends are just not interested at all. Yeah. So it's a real mixed bag.
And what's the difference? Why some and not others?
I think maybe exposure and learnings. We come from different sort of learning backgrounds, different courses, and I just finished industrial design, and it's very sustainably minded. And so I definitely believe it comes down to education.
Yeah. Jana, tell us a little bit about Patch.
Yeah, of course. So after the 2016 election, which I'm in the United States, which I'm sure all of you
we're aware.
Know enough about. Yes, I've been watching your news. It's mostly my news, which is funny. So I was quite depressed with my own art practice. Up until then, I was doing more of a traditional new media art practice. And it didn't feel like it quite aligned with my ethics with all of the things that were happening at the time. So one of my biggest pet peeves was all of my peers posting articles online and kind of going through the act of activism without actually showing up or making a change. Indiana, the state that I'm from, was actually the first to go for Trump. So it was very frustrating to watch all of these people who didn't vote or weren't active in participating in politics to be complaining about, and be afraid of what was going on. So I decided to do some self-reflection and do things, change myself before I could change anyone else. So I created myself this Fitbit or this wearable to track my own plastic use behavior. It's one of the biggest things in the United States that it's pretty much impossible to go through a whole day without using some form of plastic. Even I know it's a problem here too, where cucumbers are packaged in plastic, strawberries are packaged in plastic. So I decided to do a self-reflective practice with this wearable. So that's really what it's about. And from there, I started doing workshops. Other people were interested. Since I started this project, even my roommate has started going plastic-free, and my boyfriend has started going plastic-free, which is surprising. And it's really had an impact on people around me. So having the opportunity to work with Science Gallery has been really exciting. But yeah, that's about the project.
And I guess, what role do you think, often we don't link technology with sustainability. So what is that? What is the role that technology can play in helping us become more sustainable?
Right. So I do get that pushback quite often where people argue with me about oh, you're creating plastic waste while creating this project. But they often are tweeting at me or posting on Instagram on their phone anyway, So I think, especially in the United States, not to bring down this lovely conversation of optimism, where I'm from, it's actually completely common for people not to believe in climate change as a human-involved problem. So it's full of climate change deniers. Mike Pence is from there. His beliefs are pretty common where I'm from. And so having this kind of project where I can actually bring to the forefront the idea that we are contributing to this problem, and it's a problem that you can solve with, small micro decisions throughout the day, really breaks it down and makes people think about what they're doing, which isn't something that's happening. So I feel like it has a larger impact while I'm creating, small plastic problems. Creating this project, it's having a larger impact on how people are living their lives. Speaking of which, I should probably change my patch from green to red since we're already using stuff.
Good one, guys. Now we've ruined the patch.
Yeah.
So I guess it is this thing about making individuals more accountable. We know this is a massive problem, but it's all of our problem, right? So it can sometimes seem like this huge kind of mounting issue, but it's like, it's too big for me to really worry about. So Madison, what do you think individuals can do to start to become more, I guess, individually accountable?
I think first being aware that, baby steps actually do count, because like you were saying before, people go, I'm just an individual. If I, recycle, it's not going to affect anything. But if we all have that perception, then nothing's going to move forward. So it's getting past that and really seeing the bigger picture for what it is rather than yourself as an individual. And it's starting to change your behaviours and perception. I think they're a really big cause of sort of negligence and denial and just this like hindrance to move past what you've been doing for your whole life and see that change needs to happen for our future to be sustainable.
Of course.
So I also get that argument constantly where it's like, you're one person, like you not buying Starbucks one day isn't making a difference. When really, especially in the United States and also here, I'm sure capitalism is the biggest driving factor for all change. So I tell people like, yes, but you can vote with your dollars to, buy more sustainable products. And I feel like really that is making a bigger impact than your one individual decision. You're kind of voting with your dollars.
It's a really great point. And Andrea, I guess as a cultural institution that we're part of and universities, what is the role that we can play in terms of, I guess, starting to shift people's minds about this problem?
One, of course, is supporting the personal action and as we heard. Another role is also, however, to encourage those breakthroughs that especially art and science can bring. An example is an artist and innovator from the Netherlands, Dan Rosegaarde. He's looking at space junk. The space is full of trash. And we don't see it, so we don't realize, but it's massive. All the satellites, all the stuff that we constantly send to the space goes into pieces and stays there with huge problems actually for the future. So he's actually working with NASA and the European Space Agency to find ways to collect that junk. And actually, it's still a work in progress, but at the moment, the way to reuse or dispose of that would be to bring that back into the atmosphere. Those pieces would light up and would make fantastic fireworks. So it would also indeed eliminate the fireworks, which is another problem in our society. So, and of course, it is a work in progress, but just thinking of a breakthrough in the way we can reuse and dispose of something that we created in a very poetic way, making these fireworks, is just fantastic. And I think as cultural institutions, our job is to promote this way of thinking. And, the project will evolve and will take different shapes, but it's great to give that. And the other thing is a concept that was mentioned before, and every time we associate that with cultural institutions, there is a little bit of discomfort, is the word activism. And I think focus on the first part of the word, act, is when we talk about activism and cultural organization, and there are scholars who actually have, Richard Sandel and Bob James have written a book recently called Museum and Activism, is not about going in the streets and protest and that kind of thing. It's really enabling the agency of visitors, of the public. And enabling that agency and means really fulfilling the the function of cultural institution, which is to probe our humanness, to really question why are we human, what does it mean to be human. And in that sense, organizations like Science Gallery, universities, museums, have, I think, the moral obligation to sustain the agency of their visitors, and especially on a subject like climate change, they cannot remain neutral. They really have to take responsibility for the way we are dealing with the planet. So. Initiatives like, indeed, the upcoming exhibition here in Melbourne, and in Science Gallery Dublin, there is an exhibition upcoming called Plastic that really deals with the plastic, good and bad, are ways to enable the agency to make so that when visitors leave the place, they are not the same as before. It's not only to raise the issue, but really also to provide solution and provide thinking tools to advance our stewardship, indeed, of the planet.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that thing about being neutral or not. And I think often we think about institutions, universities, museums as being a kind of facilitator of conversations. But I think you would agree that this feels like a big enough problem that we can't be neutral about it. Yeah. And it's probably one of the few times that's really the case. So, Madison, food waste is a massive issue. What's preventing us from what's in the way of us becoming more sustainable when it comes to food?
Well, for example, if you asked me a year and a half ago about food waste, I knew nothing. I didn't know it was an issue at all until I was watching The War on Waste and I saw the food waste episode, and I was shocked. I didn't realise that a third of all the food grown and harvested and sent to our supermarkets is wasted. And I thought that was shocking. So just the unknown and just not having knowledge in that area is massive, yeah.
And I guess that's where shows, so this is a program that was on the ABC that was, I guess, kind of really visualising the waste problem. And I mean, in Australia, dumpster diving is illegal. I'm not sure whether that's the case where you guys are from.
No, I don't believe so. And actually, especially in the States, like we have huge problems with food deserts. I don't know if that's a problem here. Yeah. So food deserts are essentially in urban areas. Poorer neighborhoods tend not to have a single grocery store. So the only option for them is unhealthy food, like a McDonald's. There's a McDonald's on every corner, but there's no grocery store where you can buy produce. So those are really saved for more wealthy areas in cities. Or people with transportation who can get out of the city to go buy fresh produce. So we have a problem with food waste in the richer areas where people have, enough affluence to get access to that healthy food, and then people dumpster diving for anything that they can in, poorer neighborhoods and cities.
Do you think there's a problem in the States, and I think it's probably similar here, that, fast food is often quite affordable as well, and some of the more sustainable brands and ethical brands are not. So how do you think we can try and tackle that?
So I know for a fact, and this isn't exactly like my area of expertise, but coming from a corn state, I do know that we get a lot of agricultural subsidies for things like corn that often, is turned into corn syrup or additives that go into less healthy foods. So even in grocery stores, like what we would call chips. I don't know what you call them here. Crisps? I don't know. Okay. Okay. So things like that are, in fact, and way cheaper. You could buy a bag of Doritos for way cheaper than you can get like an apple. Yeah. So, and it also calorically, if you're, dealing with poverty, a bag of Doritos is going to sustain you longer, albeit, less healthy than an apple or something cheaper. So I think advocating for, changing the subsidies in the United States is going to be one of the biggest things that we can do. But the only way we can do that is, activism and lobbying and raising awareness to those kinds of issues.
And a question for all of you. What are some of the more, I guess, extreme examples have you heard? I went on a bit of a Google deep dive yesterday about what it really means to live waste-free. We talked about in our office doing a month of living waste-free, which included making your own toothpaste and deodorant. And And so, I mean, is it feasible? Is it realistic to think that people can do this?
Yes, it is, but it's so hard. It's if you want to like dedicate all your time to making all these products or figuring out ways to cut out plastic and just to have no waste at all, you need compost. You need to figure out how to do your compost because that in itself is challenging. So it is possible, but it is really hard, and so the everyday person, it's not going to happen.
I think also, it is, for many people it's impossible. But at the same time, I would say, acknowledge what you can do and really, as we said before, really taking little steps count. I mean, I do have a big, dark area in my life, which is flying for my work. And I can't do it otherwise. I mean, I literally, there is no other option. I try, however, in all other areas, I don't drive. I always take the bike. I always take public transport. And of course, it is it's really the behavioral change and realizing that yes, it is hard because sometimes it is hard to take the public transport and it is hard to get wet on the bike. And you could but force yourself to do that, and you can force yourself in many other areas. Indeed, in eating healthier, producing less waste, recycling wherever possible. And I think it is when you hit that spot of when it becomes a little bit uncomfortable that it's right, because then you realize, yes, it's not going to be the same. When we talk about change, change doesn't come always easily. But then understanding, realizing that you made a change, then brings you to a different level. So that's my way to advocate, provoke the change, own the change, and live indeed better in whatever way possible. Setting also, realistic goals, of course. Yeah.
I mean, I think this is maybe one area where, we sort of all cringe about social media, and if you didn't check in or if you didn't take a selfie, it didn't really happen. But maybe, and Madison, interested in your thoughts on this, maybe this is where social media can play a positive role if we do start to share these kind of stories, feel, a bit smug. What do you think?
Definitely. The power of social media is immense, and people really, they appreciate people and they follow and they respect what they do. And if you're setting a prime example and someone, sits you high, then they will do their best in their power to follow in your footsteps. And so it's providing those examples and showing how you can do it. And there are amazing people that are on social media, like the Trashes for Tossers. She's like awesome, and she has such a big following, and she herself has just made this like trash-free empire that people just adore.
I also think, especially in the United States, it's such a political, polarizing issue. So actually using social media actually becomes less helpful because it's a dividing issue over there. So people just block you and unfollow you. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do too, and why your project is so exciting, I think, is all of the innovation that can happen. If you make the conversation less about what you're taking away from people and more like what we can add to their lives to make it more sustainable, I think that's a good way to cross that divide and, I don't know, kind of talk to people who are less interested perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think, marketing and comms can play, as a marketer, can play a big role in this. And I guess in the States, as you say, and I think it's the same here, it is politicized, and you can see mountains of waste. You can see, these issues we're having with recycling locally, but still sometimes it comes down to this, left or right thing. So how can we make it neutral?
A few weeks ago, I read an interesting article on the New York Times talking about supermajorities and saying, when you deal, on issues like climate change, income inequalities, actually there is a vast majority, 70, 80% of the population who agrees on the issue. But then the issue indeed is politicized, and then there is, that polarity. So I think one strategy would be look indeed for the big majority away from the politics. And the other thing is also to realize that, yes, these are political issues, but not in the same sense indeed of party politics, but really in terms of shaping society. And it goes back indeed to the role of cultural institutions in enabling that agency of people, realizing that what we do, we shape society, and that's the definition of politics. And it's not our task to go into indeed the party politics in the elections and all that kind of stuff, but to reclaim a space for civic agency. And I think that is something that institutions are discovering now. I mean, there is, of course, in the museum studies, there's always been there, but only recently, I think, cultural institutions are reclaiming the space, which is really, I think, a very positive thing. And especially young generations are very comfortable with that. Last week we had an event in Science Gallery London where we brought together youth from all the science galleries around the world. It's called the Youth Symposium. And it was really refreshing to hear how comfortable these generations are with taking action, with reclaiming indeed I find it really beautiful definition indeed of politics in the sense of being a citizen. I think you could call it indeed civic agency. And that's something that actually we can be comfortable with, we can drive, and we can then also show that it doesn't have to end up into a dividing party issue. It is something that goes beyond, because issues like indeed climate change go beyond party politics, and even income inequalities and the way go beyond party politics. And that, I think, is our role to stand for this view.
Great. So before we go to questions, I'll just ask you guys to. We'll end on a positive note. So, what can we be optimistic about, Jana?
Oh man, you went to the pessimist first. No, I'm just kidding. So I think, like you were saying, I think younger generations, like younger than me even, are more aware of the issue as detrimental to the rest of their lives. And so I think there's a kind of urgency in them that we don't necessarily see in, older generations. Because they're really thinking that, the world might be a very different place for them when they're even my age. So I think the optimism is in younger people really taking the reins and saying, like, I don't want to live in that world. So I think that's where the optimism is.
Madison?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely young people taking the reins on sustainability and just spreading what can be done, even if it's in a small way, or if it's buying sustainably conscious products, or just spreading your ideas, your new little tips and tricks. So yes, I think it is positive, and it is becoming more commonly known and actioned upon.
Andrea?
And for me, well, of course, young generation, but there's another institution that actually makes me positive, and that's actually universities. There is a saying that there are only 3 institutions in the world that survived longer than 1,000 years. That's the military, the church, and the universities. Leaving the first 2 aside, actually, universities have been there for longer than 1,000 years. And as these institutions today, if you look at the role of universities in society, they are probably the last and the strongest steward of looking at the future, creating knowledge, standing for rights. If you look also the role of universities in civil rights, in many, many cities, it was the safe place where those conversations could start and then go outside. So reclaiming and really standing for the role of universities, I think is very important and makes me optimistic. And seeing also how many universities, including, of course, the University of Melbourne, but many...
Australia's #1 university.
Yes. Our network is a network of universities, and working close, really it makes you optimistic about the change that university can do. And again, we can leave for a moment aside bureaucracy and all things. I mean, we know that, but it's when we deal with issues so important as the ones that we discussed today, universities really are the best equipped institutions to start that conversation, to have that conversations, and actually to enable then the agency. So that's what makes me optimistic.
That's great. So we might go to questions now. We've got roving Gary on.
Want to share?
Yeah, of course.
Fantastic panel, guys. Wonderful discussion. Given that Carlton Connect is going to be the epicenter of collaboration and innovation in Melbourne Connect, what would you, each panel member, expect to see in the building, in its construction and in the way in which it's operated, that would demonstrate that this was a leading example of the way in which we can deal with waste both in construction and in the actual operation, and when people came there that they could actually learn how they could deal with waste better in their lives? What would you expect to see, and what would you expect not to see?
I don't expect to see any plastic cups and disposable. That's for a starter. I wouldn't comment on the structure. That's a field of the building. That's something I'm not. But something I would really encourage is have all the people who are in the building, mix them, force them to be in different spaces. Regularly. I mean, it would be great if the engineers spent a day every X number of days in Science Gallery, and the Science Gallery staff go to the other, because it's only with the proximity and the actual, being together and confronting each other's way of living, of working, of staying in the office that you learn. So I'm sure there will be a lot of good practices distributed and available in all the people working in the building, and mix those people so that you can learn. Maybe there is somebody actually can make their toothpaste and deodorant, and if you have those people actually roaming around the building and being your neighbor for a day, you can learn that, and you see that it's possible. So mix the people. That would be my advice, structurally and always.
Did you guys want to add anything about that? Sort of, I guess, what would a building that is best practice, what's happening inside that?
Well, I think one of the best things that I've seen so far is while working in the office at the Science Gallery is the environment is so encouraging. And so I think especially in an environment like that, if you can bring in these more sustainable practices, using, not edible, but waste-made plates or more sustainable practices like that, and encouraging each other. I feel like that's the best way to create actual change, is having an environment of accountability, kind of, where everybody's working towards the same goal. It makes it so much easier.
Yeah, that's fine. Other questions?
Sorry. Thank you. Jennifer Henry from the University of Melbourne. It's great to hear what young people are doing, but let's not diss middle-aged people either. I think a lot of us in our community are trying to do what we can, and I'm finding the challenge is to do little things as individuals. We can still feel that it's not hopeless, just one person's actions, but what I'm finding I'm having success with in my network is doing things quietly, but then talking to other people about them. And that spreads the word. If people are hearing this message from other people that they know and that they trust, that will help spread the word. The challenge can be, if you're really passionate, is to not come out sounding super preachy, but just to do it quietly and affect your own circles, and then hopefully the message spreads. So This is not a question, definitely a comment.
Yeah. It's old-fashioned social media.
I can definitely add to that a little bit. Like when we were talking about social media as a force of change, I think it is really important to not be like smug, as you said, right? And so to come at it as from more of a humble stance, which is really hard for me because I will fight anyone about climate change. But to come at it as from more of a like human perspective and talking to people that you know, I think is the most important way. Yeah.
Hi. I've done umpteen talks explaining climate change to all sorts of quite conservative groups. I've also stood on umpteen stands in sustainability festivals for many years. Two things. It was one of the things, Jennifer, I think, was the last lady. One, people get depressed when you talk about it. It's always the same stage in the talk, about 80% in. I keep saying, every one of you is a leader by example. You don't have to go and preach. It's exactly the same, Pete. Remember, every one of us is a leader by example. Two, do not forget the grandparents. They are really concerned. They really are concerned. So talk to the grandparents. And in fact, for your Carlton Connect, have a special about grandparents, etc., what they can do. And again, what they can do is be a leader by example. It's actually quite simple stuff. Right? Third is we need to drop the meteorology term climate change and go to what it is and empower the whole room. It's a climate emergency. Call it a climate emergency. Stop mucking around with a term that can be painted over. Say what it is. That's what it is today. Fourth, we've already got the answer on waste. It's just because the pollies and the banks hate it. The greenhouse gas protocol actually measures the greenhouse gas from waste and start talking about it. That's what the greenhouse gas concept is. It's in the protocol already today. And you can judge it and measure it and then start saying, when we produce, you've got to pay for that greenhouse gas waste. It's all there. And I wouldn't mind going back to those basics, and that's the way to get people in there. And I think art is the medium.
Yeah, it's a great point. Art can play a really powerful role. I think in kind of visualising some of these issues too and making them a bit more tangible.
Hello. This might be a cheeky question, Lee, and I apologise. I'm just curious, and I work for the University of Melbourne as well, and we've run events where we haven't been able to eliminate waste, and I know how challenging it is, so I come at it from that angle. Is there a reason today? Can we discuss some of the barriers that are existing at events like this, why we can't have a disposable event with no disposable items? Because I think we're talking about small changes, and I think we need to talk about how we can address them as the people in the room that are clearly passionate about this issue, and yourselves included as the organisers. And I don't mean that as an affront, I'm just interested.
It's a great question, and certainly something with disposable that we've been looking at. So we have Science Gallery has come up with, I guess, a sustainability policy and a green action plan. So we are doing things. I can't talk about this morning. It is very disappointing, I must say. But in our office, we've made our own cleaning products. We've printed our marketing collateral on 100% recycled paper. Our brochures are made from recycled coffee cups, which we know is one of the biggest issues. In terms of the structures within the exhibition, they're all recycled and reused into our future gallery. But it is really hard. We're flying flying artists out in order for them to, I guess, have these conversations. And we believe that that's important enough. We're carbon offsetting those flights, obviously, but, you know, travel is one of the biggest offenders. So I think, you know, as organisations, I know the university is pretty good overall, but it's massive. You know, there's 7,000 people that work there. It's really hard to make 7,000 people accountable, but I think it is about starting small, so within your own team. So we're a team of sort of 8 people. What can we do? What can we share within that 8 to make ourselves more accountable? How can we then, I guess, spread that to the whole building that we're in? And then, you know, particularly, I guess, moving into Melbourne Connect, you know, what are the examples that we can set for the rest of the building? I think we've just got one last question. Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Jen Ray. I'm an artist. I have actually a question for the Science Gallery. In terms of risk, in terms of some of the things that artists are doing to probe through some of the legalities, you know, I'm wondering if anything actually ever gets to policy. Like right now, I'm working on a project where I'm trying to have completely closed loop, and it's actually a project for Science Gallery to be completely closed loop, but I keep coming up against legalities. Like I'm not allowed to recycle beer bottles and refill them. You know, in order to drink certain things, you know, I've got to, you know, there's safety and risk and so forth. So I'm wondering if there's any examples where it's actually pushed through with policy.
I'm going to jump to Rose.
So that's a great question. That's why we're doing it, because we want policy, we want procedure, we want norms to be pushed. I think the conversation about why it is inexcusable that we don't have disposable cups and plates today. It's just busy people, you know, moving forward without thinking at times. For that point, yeah, so with our blood show, we sterilised HIV positive blood and gave it to people to hold. We are, you know, drinking urine in this show. We've got a legal list that is about, I know we should just do one day just for an exhibit, we should just in small print do our list of legal issues that we've confronted the university with. You know, we involve dogs, we involve, you know, piss, shit, drink, you know, that's what we do, and it's why we do it, to push some of this. To Andrea's point, universities have been around for thousands of years, so we know they're not going to move overnight. But we also know that everything we do does make a difference and makes it easier the next time, and makes the sort of risk-adverse nature of a university less so the next time. I have worked in the public sector until now, so with in big public institutions, and I can say with confidence that the university sector is much more up for this discussion and dialogue and pushing envelopes than state institutions. And our job is to stay in that really edgy space. So it'll happen, but slowly is the answer. And we want it to happen, yeah.
Yeah, the lawyers love us. They don't. So thanks to everyone, great questions, and thanks especially to our panel. Great to hear from all of your amazing and different perspectives. And I think, you know, let's keep fighting the good fight. Young people and universities and art and culture have a really big role to play. So, you know, be an activist in your own circle. So thank you very much.